At this point, I'll be surprised if Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for making that possible. Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss is here. Later on, I will talk about Notre Dame. I'm slowly but surely being turned into an anti-Notre Dame guy. I will explain. It's not because I don't like Marcus Freeman. And the ACC title hunt is wild. We've got to deal with fallout from that. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Stephen, you've been busy recently. Okay. Something has been going on in Oxford. There have been a lot of goings-ons. And out of the meeting on Friday in which Ole Miss met with Lane Kiffin and talked about his future there, the statement that was released, it would be a rabbit out of the hat if they keep him in Oxford, right?
Yeah, I don't think you release a statement that he's going to announce the Saturday after the game when he could have signed the extension right then, and you could pretty much guarantee that you're going to win the game by 40. So I think, personally, I think he is, let's say, leaning LSU at the moment. But if you look online, it's the most strange thing you've ever seen. Florida has absolute confidence that they're getting him. LSU has absolute confidence they're getting him. And it comes across like he's just telling everybody yes at this point. So it also becomes, what do you believe? And being certain is pretty dangerous right now about what could happen. But I think he ends up at LSU come Saturday after the Egg Bowl.
That's where my head is at, just because the offer is so big. And look, Florida is a premier job in college football. Top tier. I think when you consider the roster that is in place, Florida's got a pretty solid one. They just need better coaching. I think we've seen that throughout the course of this year. I still think most people would tell you LSU's the better job. And I think it's close, because Florida, man, you've got great support from the fans at both of these places. You are in a recruiting hotbed in Florida, but you're also there in Louisiana, and you're right next to Texas. And I think that's why, if I were Lane Kiffin and I were set on leaving Ole Miss, I'd probably go to LSU, because it's close. It really is. I don't think there's a bad decision if he's set on leaving. But frankly, Stephen, if I were Lane Kiffin, I don't know that I would leave. He's got a great situation in Ole Miss where he is wanted, where he can win, where he is supported, where he's already had success. I don't know that I would leave. I'm not wired like everybody else, though. That's just me.
Well, listen to this. It's crazy. The Egg Bowl is Friday at noon Eastern time on ABC, and it's going to feature the 10-1 Ole Miss Rebels with the chance for an 11-win season and a chance to go to the SEC title game on top of everything else. You just need Auburn to beat Alabama on the Plains, and you need Texas to beat A&M in Austin. That's all that is required for you to make that step if you win the game. And you're going to be coached in potentially the biggest game in program history by the potential LSU coach against your rival. Think about the optics of that. Of what could happen. And if Ole Miss wins the game, like I said, I don't expect Lane Kiffin to coach another game after the Egg Bowl at Ole Miss. That's where I am at the moment, this personal opinion. But it's absolutely bizarre to think about the fact that how we've gotten here to this point, to where potentially the LSU coach is coaching your team against Mississippi State in the biggest game in the Ole Miss program history. And that is something that everybody needs to keep in mind. Now, I will give the fan base a ton of credit right now. They are buying up tickets at Davis Wade Stadium in Starkville to basically try to make that a home game. I mean, the fans are all in for the players and what they've done, the stories of Kewan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss and those guys. And if Ole Miss gets the win, and it's always a tight game when you play an Egg Bowl, it is always going to be a weird game. But if Ole Miss gets the win like they're supposed to do, I think they're 7.5-point favorites on FanDuel right now. If Ole Miss gets that win, they're 11-1. They're basically a lock for the playoffs at that point, and you're in play for the SEC championship game because you watch a game that night, which is Texas and Texas A&M, and then Saturday night is Auburn and Alabama. So there's a lot to play for. There's a lot for the Ole Miss fan base to be excited for. And the one thing that as an Ole Miss fan, and that Ole Miss fans are going to have a hard time reconciling if Lane Kiffin somehow says, hey, he's going to stick around in Oxford, is this noise, this stuff, basically superseded the greatest football season in modern Ole Miss history over a selfish thing. All of the attention are off of these kids. Trinidad Chambliss, wonderful story. Kewan Lacey, wonderful story. The fact that the defensive line is very much high school built in an era of the Portal King. All of this is wonderful stories, and all we're talking about is what will Lane Kiffin do. He's setting up his LeBron decision, essentially, of what's been set up. And nobody is talking about the Egg Bowl right now, and I don't know as a fan if I'll be able to forgive or forget that.
That's very well said. I wouldn't either, and I think that it totally sucks. That Ole Miss for a long time wasn't anything special. Well, here you go. You've got a real chance. And yeah, Ohio State looks like a juggernaut every single week. I mean, they wait until the second half to start playing good football, but once they do, boy, they're tough. They're really but everything else in college football, everybody else, this is as level as it has ever been. That's been what the portal has done. You've had programs that haven't been up in a long time, like Ole Miss or Vanderbilt. I don't mean to put them in the same breath. I'm just citing examples here. Are currently way ahead of Florida and LSU. You've got programs all over. Indiana is the number 2 team in the country, for goodness sake. 2 years ago, that was a crap job in college football. Now they're one of the best teams in the country. So I do think it's important to point out, Stephen, in this conversation, that you're 100% right. It is really unfortunate that a story like Trinidad Chambliss and everybody else on Ole Miss, that's just getting completely overshadowed, and that they are, if Lane Kiffin does leave after the Egg Bowl, they're just going to be in this state of complete and utter limbo, and they could turn it into an even better story if they find a way to go to the college football playoff and win a couple of games without Lane Kiffin. But this is perhaps the best example of how broken the college football calendar is and how badly the sport needs to have someone or something fix it. I don't know who that is. I'll run for commissioner if you want. I'll take a salary of $500 a year if it means we will make, as long as I can keep my shows, as long as we can make the sport better, because this is the problem. If you're Lane Kiffin and you're LSU wanting to have these discussions and such, that's one thing. But the portal is in January, and I'm glad we got away with the early portal before bowl season, but they still have it before the season ends. So programs that want to compete, they're going to bring in a coach on this time. And you can be mad at LSU or you can be mad at Lane Kiffin, but really it's the classic therapist question. Who are you really mad at? And the answer is college football. The answer is college football, and the calendar is just so unbelievably bad. It's one thing if Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss, but that he can't even, and frankly, I don't like it for Lane either, that he has to make this decision on this timeline. He should be able to go through the entire season, and the transfer portal should open after the national championship game, and then you should have a coaching carousel and national signing day in February and March, and then you go through spring ball, and we start the whole thing over. I had to get that out there. I just cannot stand that this is where the sport is legitimately at.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be about the student athletes.
Yeah, it's not.
And you have all of these stories about that, and we're talking about a coach going to different places whose teams are essentially over. Their season is over because they're not very good, and we're taking the spotlight off of something that is a legit story in college football. And I'm just going to say this. I know that coaching availability is a part of the bylaws and the college football playoff committee ranking system. If you move this Ole Miss team down at least one place, if you move them at all over this, you're a fraud, you're a farce, and it's an embarrassment to the sport, worse than the calendar that is out there right now. Because this isn't even everybody likes to talk about Jordan Travis and FSU and all of that happened. First of all, this is a 12-team playoff, and that was a 14 playoff. Second of all, none of the players are affected. It is an adult on the outside that is causing every bit of this. And I think a room full of athletic directors at least are going to realize is like, man, that would be a terrible situation if you were in, instead of just punishing the overarching kids that made all of this possible to begin with.
I put out a top 25 every week. If Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, they will not be falling in my top 25. That is my pledge to you and the college football community, Stephen. That will not happen. Stephen Willis, Locked on Ole Miss. Great as always. I didn't want to go in the direction I'm going next. I'm just becoming more and more anti-Notre Dame. First, this episode brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday season is right around the corner, and that means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. That is the sort of vocabulary range that you might see in a Jeopardy category, but there's an even bigger range than that on Wayfair's website. Everything you need, Wayfair has you covered. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. 70% sign. That's how much you can get off. WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair.com. Sale ends December 7th. Check out Wayfair and get ready for the holidays. The more time passes, the less I want to see Notre Dame in the playoff. Even though I think Notre Dame's a really good team. I think they're a playoff caliber team. They just haven't had a playoff caliber season. They have a good win over USC, beat them by 10 points at home in the rain. Okay, that's a good win. I've got USC inside my top 20. By the way, for those watching on YouTube, I'm going to throw up my latest top 25 rankings. You may notice that unlike the playoff committee, I've got Miami ahead of Notre Dame. Why? Because Miami beat Notre Dame. I watched it happen. And even though I agree with what the committee is messaging by keeping Notre Dame ahead of Miami, we'll see what they do this week on Tuesday night. I agree with what they're saying, which is, who do I think is the better football team? The answer is Notre Dame. That is not what I want rankings to be about. That is not what my rankings are about. Miami has moved ahead because the losses that they had, by the way, one of them is to a team you can see here on YouTube. I have inside the top 25 in SMU. And Louisville's not a great loss, but they're not a horrible loss either. They're fine. When Miller Moss is healthy, Louisville was pushing for an ACC championship. They didn't get there, but it's not some Alabama losing to Florida State level loss. So for that to be Miami's resume, to me, makes the head-to-head relevant. When the records are the same, and if the resumes are within a certain striking distance, which is pretty big in my view, the head-to-head has to take priority there, especially as you get closer to releasing the 12 teams that are going to make the college football playoff. So I don't dislike Notre Dame because of anything the Irish have done. I think Marcus Freeman is a heck of a coach. I love CJ Carr. Jeremiah Love's story is great. He's also an awesome football player, best running back in the country. I said before the season he'd be my preseason Heisman dark horse that no one was talking about, that should have been a favorite, quite frankly. Or I didn't feel like enough folks were talking about. Anyway, I love all of that about Notre Dame. Guess what? I don't want that game against Miami to not matter, because the ramifications for college football in the long run, I think, could be pretty dire. You could have a college football world where teams still control their own schedules, and if they expand the playoff again, which is ridiculous, but whatever, if they were to do that again, I still think teams will look at the Miami Notre Dame if the Irish get in over the Hurricanes, and they will say, hey, What's the point of scheduling a big game? And I'm going to come on this show and commend all the teams that have kept those sorts of games, right? Notre Dame has done that. Some other schools have done, but not everybody is. And someone's going to make the point, and it's going to cycle through everybody's mindset, and it's going to get into an athletic director's head, and you're going to see more of what Indiana has done, which I think is terrible. And I think the Hoosiers are a great team. The way that their non-conference slate sets up in the next several years is not right, number one. Number two, it's not good for the sport. But if you put Notre Dame into the playoff over Miami, the message you are sending is all that we actually care about inside the committee are style points and eye test. So Notre Dame blasted Syracuse in a way that, if you listen to my best bet segment last week, you know I didn't think was going to quite happen, but it did. It was 35-0 at the end of the first quarter. Syracuse is going to be just fine as a program. Fran Brown is a really good head coach. They get Steve Angeli back. If he can be fully healthy, they'll be fine, okay? I'm not that worried about it. So for Syracuse to have lost like that to Notre Dame didn't tell me everything about the Orange that I needed to know because I already had that information. It told me that Notre Dame knows. I don't know if they've been told. I'm not alleging a big grand conspiracy here, but they know that they've got to make it look pretty. They've got to justify what the committee is doing. And Notre Dame beating Syracuse like that, they didn't need to. They won 70-7. 70-7 was the final score of this game. And CJ Carr threw for 49 yards. Notre Dame ran for 329. This was an FCS level domination. It was 49-0 at the half. So for Notre Dame to do that the way it came off to me, and I don't think this is fair to the Irish, I'm just telling you how it makes me feel. Guess there's something therapeutic about me hosting this show. Anyway, Notre Dame winning that game amidst these resume discussions screams guy who gets a really big truck and jacks up the wheels and makes the engine loud. He's overcompensating for something. I'm not going to go into the details of all that. I think you're all smart enough to put 2 and 2 together. The way that Notre Dame beat Syracuse is, yes, at the same time impressive. And on the other hand, unless there is mass chaos in the college football playoff coming into rivalry week, which there could be, I do not want Notre Dame in over Miami. If Miami loses to Pitt, which they absolutely could, okay, that's fine. Then I have no objection because Miami didn't do their job. But that game earlier in the season that was much talked about was one of the biggest non-conference games of the season in this wonderful sport. It has to matter. Or else why are we playing them? Why does it matter? You're just becoming the NFL a little bit more at a time. And I've heard some conversations get floated out there in the media space about, man, this 12-team playoff has been great. You know, I heard Josh Pate talking about how, well, it hasn't been as bad as I thought. I think there's some merit to that. I also think that we're setting ourselves up to look back and go, oh, yeah, those big games didn't matter. Like Alabama losing to Florida State, they're in control of their own fate to get to the playoff. If they lose to Auburn, I don't want them anywhere near the playoff. But for Notre Dame to be in this position and everyone to have just decided that they should be in and forget, I know that they lost those games. I get it. Texas A&M is indeed really good. It was a close game. I'm not telling you Notre Dame should be way away from the playoff or that they shouldn't get in at 10-2. But if you're putting Notre Dame in the playoff, you have to put Miami in. You have to do it. And I hope, frankly, that either Notre Dame, they're not going to lose. I hope that either Miami loses to make this simpler. I'm not rooting for that. This is a difficult thing to communicate. Just from an overall health of the sport standpoint, I don't want 10-2 Notre Dame in the playoff and 10-2 Miami not in the playoff. You either put Miami in and not Notre Dame, both of them in, or Miami loses to Pitt. Those are the acceptable outcomes. But I will not be okay with Notre Dame getting in. I absolutely will not, unless Miami's also in the playoff. And yes, Miami's losses are not as quality as Notre Dame's. Shouldn't we be rewarding wins more than losses? We're doing that with Alabama. Why are we not doing it with Miami? I don't know. Well, I have an idea. It's just not a very good explanation. So, end of rant. That's why I'm becoming anti-Notre Dame. It's just getting more and more annoying that this is where it's trending. And frankly, I have Notre Dame in my top 25 because I think they're a really good team and they've had a good season. I have them at number 12. If the playoff ended today, neither Notre Dame nor Miami would be in my 12-team playoff. Because the ACC champion is ranked outside. I have Miami at 11, Notre Dame at 12. Miami would not get in because they won't be the ACC champ. The Group of 5 champ would get in and knock those two out, and I would be perfectly fine with that. So that's not what the committee has. The committee's got Notre Dame inside the top 10. I think that stinks. Speaking of the ACC, that title hunt, I'm going to try to break all this down. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football is back, and it's been back for quite a long time, and we're all thrilled about it. Rivalry Week is here. If you want to go to any of the Rivalry Week games and you don't have a ticket yet, Game Time is the place you want to get that ticket because rivalries are the best part about college football that's separated from the NFL. The pageantry, the tradition, all of that is there, but it's the rivalries. If you want to experience something like the game in person or Oregon, Washington, or any number of other rivalry games this week, Game Time is the place to go. The app that gives the advantage back to fans. No more endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. I actually, as this show's airing, have tickets to a basketball game in Vegas later today that I got on Game Time. Why did I use Game Time? Because I got a better deal. The process was super easy. Tickets get to my phone. They stay there. Process is just better. That's the way they roll. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, there's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Did you know that SMU could wind up making the playoff for a second straight year? SMU, you forgot about them since they beat Miami because they lost to, Wake Forest. And by the way, can I just, while I'm talking about this league, throw out Jake Dickert or Tony Elliott? They should probably be co-coaches of the year. Wake Forest and Virginia's head guys, they have done remarkable jobs. Dickert has done an exceptional job in his first season over there with the Demon Deacons. But SMU, if they win this week, what does that mean? What does it mean if Virginia wins? What if Pitt beats Miami? What if Miami beats Pitt? Well, if Miami beats Pitt and SMU and Virginia both win, it's SMU and Virginia in the ACC championship game, and the winner will be going to the college football playoff. That could be kind of fun. Neither team, I think, is capable of winning a football game once they get to the playoff, unless they draw a great matchup or there's a major injury there. But there are three teams realistically that are in play because there are three teams with one loss. Now, technically, chaos could ensue, and Georgia Tech or Miami or maybe Duke, I guess, could find their way in. But I got sent these scenarios by my guy Alex Dono over at Locked On Canes and wanted to break all of this down because SMU has got Cal this week on the road, who just lost to Stanford in embarrassing fashion. So maybe there's a bounce-back, wounded animal, nothing to lose sort of vibe there with the Golden Bears. But SMU's a much better team. And Virginia's got Virginia Tech, and Pitt has Miami. So those are the three teams at the top of the ACC standings. So Virginia gets into the conference championship game with an SMU loss, or if they win, with an SMU loss plus an NC State loss and a Syracuse loss. SMU gets in if they win with a Pitt loss to Miami, a Duke loss to Wake Forest, an NC State loss, and a Virginia loss. Pitt has the simplest scenario to make the ACC championship game. If Pitt wins and Virginia loses, they're in. Or if Pitt wins and SMU loses, they are in. Georgia Tech can get in. I'm not even close to being done reading this scenario, so just prepare yourself. Patience. Georgia Tech can get in if Virginia loses and SMU loses. Remember, Georgia Tech plays Georgia. They're done with ACC play. They're sitting there at 6-2 after their loss to Pitt. But if Virginia and SMU lose, then Georgia Tech makes the ACC championship game. Here are the scenarios for Miami. This is all possible. This is all possible. And I didn't even try to memorize all of this. Those on YouTube can see I'm reading this off a list because, as I dubbed it a while ago, the ACC is the real chaos conference out there. Miami gets in with any of these four scenarios: a win with an SMU win and a Duke loss and a Virginia loss. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2, Miami wins against Pitt. They get a Virginia win, a Duke loss, an SMU loss, an NC State win, and a Syracuse win. Scenario 3 for Miami is they win, Duke wins, Virginia loses, SMU loses, NC State wins. Scenario 4, they win, SMU loses, Duke loses, Virginia loses, Syracuse and NC State win. I think that's Syracuse or NC State. There's a slash we haven't decided as a society if that's and or. It's probably, I think that's an or. Duke has got these scenarios, and then I'm done, I promise. Win plus a Pitt loss and an SMU loss. Win plus a Pitt loss, a Virginia loss, and an NC State loss. So I wanted to read those out there for you all so you could have a verbal documentation, and then if you want to go back, you can just hit the rewind button and be like, wait, so Miami does... And if you send me a message saying, what are the scenarios, I'm probably just going to send you the graphic that my guy Dono gave me right there. So the ACC has not been very good this year, and they also keep getting in their own way. Georgia Tech losing last week removed most possibility of the ACC getting 2 teams in the playoff. But here's the wild thing. Here is the wild thing for the ACC. There's a world where they could still get 2 teams into the college football playoff. And I imagine some SEC folks would go absolutely bananas. There is still a world in which they get 0 teams into the college football playoff. That would arise if Duke winds up being the conference champion. I just read you the 2 scenarios. I don't know how it's all playing out this weekend. It's all on the line, but I don't know how it's going. Duke is a 5-loss team. At 8-5 and champion of the ACC, Duke should not be in the top 25. They won't be in my top 25, and I like Duke coming into this year. And Darian Mentz is a good quarterback, but they have not been a complete football team this season under Manny Diaz. So if that were to happen, just bear with me here for a moment. And this is as I say every show, this is the greatest and craziest sport on planet Earth. So don't tell me that none of this, it's not going to happen. Look, it might not. You might think back to this segment later this week and go, well, Spencer wasted his time discussing that. I just want to have you aware because it is legitimately possible. And don't tell me what is likely or guaranteed to happen in the ACC on a week-to-week basis. If Duke were to become the ACC champion somehow, some way, which 2 conferences would get in? I don't think the committee is going to rank a 5-loss ACC champion. And so the language says 5 highest-ranked conference champions. This would open the door for the American champion, and I hope that game is played between Tulane and North Texas. I think those are the best and most deserving teams in the American going forward. The winner of that, and then if James Madison were to win the Sun Belt, or let me throw this one at you guys, if San Diego State wins the Mountain West, it's not insane. They're the second best group of 5 league. They very much are. I could see it. Now, the most likely scenario is we get 2 teams that are going to have to win the ACC championship game to get in, and that'll be fun. That'll be high stakes. It'll be exciting. But I dubbed this league the Chaos Conference many weeks ago on the program, and now we are in that number of wild scenarios, possibly. I hope there's an alternate universe where Duke just plays for an ACC championship game so that folks that have ignored this conference all year can realize for the first time what exactly is happening and how much madness it is. But you know what? I'm here for it. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful